Cam Rogers here for Believe Me alongside Casey Hudson and Brandon Lang. Guys, let's discuss the opening lines here for Super Bowl 58. Don't give us a selection. We'll save that for next week. But Brandon, your initial thoughts here, Kansas City, a dog plus 1.5.
You just have to ask yourself one question. I understand this is a 44 Magnum, the most powerful handgun alive, and can blow your head clean off. But the question you should be asking yourself is, has he fired 6 shots or has he fired 5? Little Clint Eastwood for you. Going into the Baltimore game, we all knew the number. Patrick Mahomes, 9-3 straight up, 11-1 against the spread as an underdog. Now, we knew that number the previous week in Buffalo. 8-3 straight up, 10-1 against the spread as an underdog. Then he goes and beats Buffalo. Now it's 11-1, 9-3. Then he beats the Ravens. Now it's 10-3 and 12-1. So the question is this: do you go against this man as a dog, not learning your lesson? Or is the right side of the game writing the stat, which we've just seen? You beat the number 2 seed in their building. You beat the number 1 seed in their building. What do? Does the Niners defense all of a sudden show up the way they did in the second half against Detroit? So lots to think about. Purdy looked great in the second half. But the flip side of it is that was the Detroit Lions defense. They're now facing the number 2 overall scoring defense in the NFL. And the last question to ask yourself is this in breaking down the game. You have a defensive coordinator that came up with a brilliant game plan against Lamar in Baltimore. He really did. People tend to forget this is the same defensive coordinator that in 2 weeks to prepare for the 18-0 New England Patriots, they lost to the Patriots. I think it was 45-35 or something in New York. New York had nothing to play for. They already had the playoff spot. They were going to rest their starters, but they didn't. They played the game to win, and they hit Brady, I think, 31 times, but never sacked him. But they hit him 31 times. In those 2 weeks, Steve Spagnuolo installed 21 different blitz packages that the Patriots had never seen, and he knocked off the probably, without question, the greatest team in NFL history. The 70-something, 72 Dolphins, please don't get me started. Randy Moss, Tom Brady. That team that year went into Buffalo and beat Buffalo 55-10. They were a 24-point home favorite against the Eagles. They were laying numbers that year that you've never seen ever and you'll never see again for a team in point spreads. Steve Spagnuolo, 2 weeks to prepare. Andy Reid, 2 weeks to prepare. But Spagnuolo versus Brock Purdy. Patrick Mahomes against that defense. Plus 1.5. But the last thing I leave you with is this. Why is Vegas making the Niners a favorite? Does Vegas know something we don't? Do you trust the number? Remember, casinos weren't built on winners. They were built on losers. Is Vegas begging you to take the Chiefs because they're handing you the Niners? Lots to think about the next couple of weeks.
Wow, Casey, yeah, a lot to marinate there. I mean, that last point by Brandon is so true because I see that plus 1.5 and I want to take the Chiefs. Your thoughts on this opening line?
Yeah, well, kind of just feeding off of what Brandon said, but something you and I chatted about over the weekend, Cam, was we kind of took a lot of TikTok heat this past weekend because of some things that people thought were oversights on our end when it came to the Chiefs and the Chiefs defense. I'll start by saying this. I'm a numbers person. I know the eye test can be different from statistics, but when I see a team completely ishing the bed week after week after week in certain structures, I'm going to lean in a different direction. Have the Chiefs defense kind of re-sparked in a sense to what they were performing at the end of last season? Yes, I'll give them that credit. Is Andy Reid still one of the most versatile, creative coaches out there? Absolutely. So when you're going against him, it's not always going to be a plain and easy situation. But The 49ers were a team that I went against only because their defense started to digress over the last couple of weeks. That second half defense, if they show up and apply the pressure, we saw how Patrick Mahomes is when pressure is on his tail and the right calls are being made. There was a lot of questionable calls when they played versus the Eagles in the Super Bowl as well. So I don't want to bite the bait on the 1.5 favorites when it comes to Vegas. I want to stick with my gut on this. And I want to say the 49ers deserve it more. I'm sorry. I'm leaning towards the 49ers deserving it more. Not what I'm leaning towards my pick, but just deserving it more. If that defense can go up in every aspect of the game, if they can pull off what they did in the second quarter, and I know it was the Lions, but regardless, look at who the Chiefs lost to this season: the Broncos, the Eagles, the Packers, the Bills, the Raiders. They can be got. And I think that Kyle Shanahan and the rest of the staff showed that they can get a little bit more creative and that they can compete in the mental aspect of the game. So we'll see.
Lots to chew on here, of course. Plenty of more coming up on Believe Me.